Retreat Center, and I just want to say a word about it in case you haven't. The chair of the board here, Bill Resnick, and another board member, Robert DeForest, had a vision to create a Southern California retreat center, a place for intensive practice. We have Spirit Rock up north and IMS on the East Coast, and so they had this vision to have one. Trudy's Long had that vision also. So they did it, and in Big Bear, 2.5 hours to the east in the mountains, there's a retreat center. InsightLA is partnering with them and programming the calendar. So I've had the pleasure of being a big part of the programming for the calendar for the 2020 year. And there's about 23 retreats that we're hosting up there for intensive practice, ranging from 4 days to 2 weeks. So we had our retreats in July this year. It's a really beautiful center, and a lot of great teachers are coming. So on the very readable new InsightLA website, I don't know if you've been enjoying it, under residential retreats, there's a whole list of calendars there. So check it out. I wanted to ask first, before we start other things that start if you noticed any effect of the 31 parts, 32 parts meditation. Anybody want to share any part of their experience, what effect it had on you, good or bad? Jasmine.
It was interesting because at the beginning I could identify with the different places that you were mentioning, the kidneys, because I knew where those were. And then all of a sudden you started on these more, I don't know, not esoteric, but places like pus. And I didn't know how to identify
pus?
them in my body. So it was actually in a way more relaxing but there were so many parts of the body that I never even thought of as part of the body.
Yeah, I know exactly.
So that was really interesting.
One of the benefits I find, it's funny because when they give this teaching, what they called is the reflection on the repulsion of the body. It's meant to, as an antidote for lust, really. And it really does that. If you're overwhelmed with lust in a way that you don't want to act on that, sometimes we don't want to act on our lustful feelings, right? It will help to kind of appease that energy in a really nice way. But but I find it does so much more than that. As I practice, I find it very grounding. I find it very kind and acknowledging my body that I'm so often ignoring. And another thing that I really like is it's a great leveler of status. If you can acknowledge it on the internal and external, the fabrication, the mental construct, the entirely made up status world that we live so much of our time in goes away completely. It's not a reality, status isn't a reality. There's nothing real to it. It's all mentally constructed. It's all changing. Sometimes you'll have it in some existence and sometimes you won't. And people try to have ownership of their status subconsciously, of course, and that's always going to lead to pain. So of course, it affects how we treat people. It affects everybody in here. We can't, even if we're pretty good at it not affecting us, which I think I am pretty good at it not affecting me, it affects me, So it's a great level. If you ever feel intimidated, you have to give a speech, just imagine everybody's pus and blood and urine. You won't be nervous anymore. So I wanted to read this because my friend Casey Howe shared a quote from Bhante Gunaratana. Somewhere in this process of practicing mindfulness, you will come face to face with a sudden and shocking realization that you are completely crazy. Your mind is a shrieking, gibbering madhouse on wheels, barreling pell-mell down the hill, utterly out of control and hopeless. Is that untrue for anybody? No problem. You're not crazier than you were yesterday. It has always been this way, and you just never noticed. You're also no crazier than everybody else around you. The only difference is that you have confronted the situation, and they are not. So I think when we, go into our practice, see our minds, we can start to really be harsh or critical on ourselves. And the first noble truth is always bringing us back to that place that really universally the mind is a troublemaker for people. It causes problems unnecessarily, goes to all kinds of places that don't produce anything that help or benefit ourselves, in fact, hurt ourselves. And that this is just what we are born into. We don't have to be overwhelmed by it or identify with it. Hopefully we can have some humor around it, like Bhante Gunaratana is good at helping people with. It's just the way it is. And the very fortunate thing is that this practice and path of awareness is such a powerful healer of all that afflicts us humans and all that afflicts our hearts. Here's another, do I want to read that one or this one? Hold on. No. When embraced, the rod of violence breeds danger and fear, said the Buddha. Look at people in strife. I will tell you how I experience terror. Seeing people floundering like fish in small puddles, competing with one another. Have you ever seen that? People competing with each other, floundering. We witnessed that, right? As I saw this, fear came into me. The world was entirely without substance. All the directions were knocked out of line. Wanting a haven for myself, I saw nothing that wasn't laid claim to. Seeing nothing in the end but competition, I felt discontent. And then I saw an arrow here, so very hard to see, embedded in the heart. Overcome by this arrow, we run in all directions. But simply on pulling it out, you don't run, you don't sink. So pointing to the cause of the floundering in competition as the arrow that is inside us in our heart. There isn't a problem, in the things that go on in our world when we can find our own inner wisdom about it. I love that arrow in the heart, the creation of pain and suffering, the internal, the thing that we very much can do something about, and what this practice so much helps us with. There's a particular story that I'm always very inspired about, and as I reflect and see strife in the world, do you guys see any strife in the world? And the causes of strife, and how do I know what the causes of strife are in the world? My practice right now is really on reacting to people clinging to their views. If I'm reacting to people clinging to their views, then I'm creating strife. So that's where, because I'm not fully enlightened, I do that still, but that's where my practice is. But when I see that, I can see the levels. So there's a wisdom there. People are fighting because they're clinging to their views. But if I cling to the view that people shouldn't cling to their views, then I'm contributing to that suffering. And so my practice is always seeing, and where am I contributing to the strife? Where am I contributing to the suffering? And the ego is relentless in its tricking of our minds to create separation, to create distance, to cling, to want to hold on to something substantial in the mind, to want to hold on to viewpoints, even because why? Because they're right? Our viewpoints are right. And so, but seeing, wisely, if that is actually really creating. The Buddha was so wise that he told people not even to cling to his own doctrine. Find another teacher that ever said that. Because if you cling to the certain piece of that teaching, and then that's making you separate and fight against, then you're not practicing the doctrine at that point. That was the beauty of him and his teachings. But I love the parable of the blind men and the elephant. Do you know it? It's very common. And I like reflecting on it again and again and again. Anybody never heard the parable? Okay, so I'll read it as it is then. It's old, and it's not just Buddhist. It comes from the Jain tradition, I think. In India, there's another. So it doesn't have its roots just in Buddhism. You're welcome. A group of blind men heard that a strange animal, they had never seen an elephant, called an elephant obviously they'd never seen an elephant, called an elephant had been brought to the town, but none of them were aware of its shape and form. Out of curiosity, they said, "We must inspect it and know it by touch, of which we are capable." So they sought it out, and when they found it, they groped about it. In the case of the first person, whose hand landed on the trunk, said, "This being is like a thick snake." For another one, whose hand reached its ear, it seemed like a kind of fan. As for another person, whose hand was upon its legs, said, "The elephant is a pillar like a tree trunk." The blind man who placed his hand upon its side said, "The elephant is a wall." And another who felt its tail described it as a rope. The last felt its tusk, stating the elephant is that which is hard and smooth like a spear. And then the commentary on it, "Oh, how they cling and wrangle, some who claim for preacher and monk the honored name, for quarreling each to his view they cling, such folks see only one side of thing." Only one side of a thing. And if we become better listeners in our conversations with people, when we do quarrel, we can often see that that's exactly what's going on between two people when they're fighting. One's saying one thing from a certain point of view and clinging to that. But when we cling to that view, we don't hear, I'm not even talking about this. Does this happen between men and women sometimes? I've noticed. I have a son now, so I say, well, you really think differently than me, don't you? I'm now in a new relationship with a man who grew up in the Soviet Union. And I haven't had a lot of friends from Russia in my life. I just haven't experienced that. But because I grew up during the time of the Cold War in the 80s is when I was in the formative years of my life. It's very interesting to see that I have so many associations. And I'm a questioner of political, conditioning and all of that. But nevertheless, I have so many associations with Russia, Soviet Union, communism. He was a member of the KGB even. He was a world champion gymnast, and I was a huge gymnastics fan at the time. And because of communism, there was so much training that happened. Remember, they were dominating the world in gymnastics. So I have all these associations with that period in time. And then my views, right? Which I just blindly take to be, and very subconsciously, I don't even know that I have views or opinions. I just think I know something about something. And I don't. And I don't because I've never experienced it before, right? So it's really lovely to see there's this person, and the conditioning that's subconscious and the views that get formed, and which I don't cling so hard to anymore because mindfulness has taught me to see the person that is actually there, unobstructed from the cultural conditioning, unobstructed from my own views. And that's what we're doing. The moment that you feel a sensation in your body, you know that experience of a sensation and don't call it your leg anymore. There's just that difference, that direct experience. That's the training of the mind, where we are fresh and present for whatever is directly in front of us. And then seeing how much those cultural conditioned views are just a fabrication. And when do they help? Maybe they do sometimes. I think they do sometimes. We need our concepts. We need our references. But when do they begin to create division and harm and pain? And that's when they're good to be seen through. There's a great quote by, I think it's Ajahn Amaro, "If you love me, don't create me." And so the mind can stay free and open, and who are you? Let a person reveal themselves to you, and then we become really good listeners. And I promise from that place you can hear somebody's political views that aren't the same as yours, or whatever kinds of differences that we have, in a much more healthy and peaceful way. So anytime we feel the strife within, the great thing about this practice is the accountability that it gives back to us. Again, we're coming back to ourselves. How am I being? How am I creating strife here? How am I creating strife? And what can I do about it? And then it turns out to be something that's just ever and totally simplistic, and like the practical practice that we practiced here with becoming aware of our bodies, like how does that relate to creating peace in the world? But what it does is create a habit in the mind of awareness and a willingness to put in that effort rather than just letting stories, because they appear in your mind mostly uninvestigated, be what dictate your life. So as we sit in formal meditation practice, like we did, attention in the body, that's the reality of what's happening. The mind so much wants to construct, deconstruct, manipulate, change, constantly getting in that relationship where you're kind of riding, with awareness, you're riding the wave of what's actually happening moment by moment by moment. Deepa Ma would say, then you just kind of stay on the top of the surface without getting pulled down, without plunged in. So now a moment of mindfulness, now a moment of mindfulness, and the attention in the body, because the mind is obsessively going to negative and difficult places. So when we do that, the mind then is protected, right? Mindfulness called the gatekeeper, where it protects us. Protected from, it's gonna go negative if we're not mindful. It just is. Your mind is, I promise. Tell me I'm wrong 10 years from now. If it never did, you never needed meditation. That's all. But it does. And that's just the human. So what's happened for me in a couple decades, and I know a lot of you have a couple decades of practice also, is that I'm just willing now. It doesn't upset me so much anymore. That even in my new, falling in love now, that's a really great feeling. Even in that, the mind will come and try to corrupt it and make it a miserable experience. It's not miserable right now. For once, can it just be not miserable? No, the mind will come in like, what if, no, whatever, cling, 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 cling. And what happens when I'm clinging? It's great now. It has to stay like this. Suddenly there's pain. I'm actually experiencing pain. So the mind trying to corrupt, but just pleasantness, be present here now. Is this pleasantness going to change? Yes, it's going to change. It won't stay like this. So it doesn't have to. If we stay riding on the surface, the mind doesn't cling. When it changes, it's not a problem. The love doesn't have to change when those other things change, which they will. So it's just, more strange, really more strange that we're not aware all the time, but it doesn't matter. We have this tool, and it's meant to be accompanied with us in all of the moments of our life. The more we do it, the more... Oh, I think I had a quote in here somewhere. No, where did I do with that one? The more we're aware, though, was the gist of this quote, the more happiness is there, which is really the purpose of our practice. When the mind is free from stress and free from the way it torments us, then what comes in its place is happiness. The load of life, we potentially could feel so much lighter. And it does, right? You've already noticed that. You meditated, you've lightened your load a bit, right? And that possibility is infinite, so that it feels like there's no more load anymore. There's a great monk called Mahaghosananda. He's called the Gandhi of Cambodia because his family was wiped out in Cambodia in the time of the Khmer Rouge in the killing fields. He was saved because he was a monk practicing in Thailand at the time. But after all of that happened, he went back in to Cambodia and was teaching, people who had lost their families to murder, death, loving kindness, actually. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize like 4 times in the 90s. He died in 2007. Now, he was a great monk, Mahaghosananda, and his teaching here, so simple and yet so profound. He says, there is no need to worry about the past or the future. The secret of happiness is to be entirely present with what is in front of you, to live fully in the present moment. You can't go back and reshape the past. It's gone. You can't dictate the future, so there's no need to worry. The next time I fly in a plane, who knows what will happen? Maybe I will arrive safely, or maybe I won't. When we make plans, we can make them only in the present moment. This is the only moment we can control. We can love this moment and use it well. Past suffering can never harm us if we truly care for the present moment. Take care of the present, and the future will be well. The Dharma is always in the present, and the present is the mother of the future. Take care of the mother, and the mother will take care of the child. So that's all I have today. So why don't we go to questions, comments, shares.
Thank you for your teaching.
You're welcome.
I love working in the body. But first, I want to thank the wonderful musicians for creating the tone and filling this room with love. It just felt like a vibration of love. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. Thanks.
I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about the sutra's definition of the, putting attention on the nature of mind as opposed to the breath or different other pointers that we've used.
Do you mean the instructions I gave in the beginning, Jasmine?
Yes.
Yeah.
When you said, about focusing on the state of mind.
Yeah.
Can you just say a little more about that?
Yeah. It's the third foundation of mindfulness. It never says anything about thought, but it will say the mind states how consciousness is affected by. So it says very, very simply, know the mind affected by, and it fills in a lot of different mind states that we experience as the mind affected by. And as you look at how thoughts are formed, when you can start to catch the thoughts right as they're arising, they're always coming out of one of those states, mostly a subtle form of restlessness, which is something that we'll have with us until full enlightenment. That's the point that somebody uproots restlessness from mostly a little sense of boredom or restlessness, seeking something. But it's interesting to just start to investigate that, because when you go to the state of consciousness, you're going to what's the root, what's forming the thoughts. So, and you're acknowledging your feelings. You're acknowledging these mind states, emotions. You're acknowledging them. And that mindfulness in general is awareness, is acknowledgement, and things heal when they're seen.
So,
Go ahead, Jasmine, and then we need the mic for you, Marilyn, so we'll come to you.
So, because mine is mostly restlessness, I think, where a thought will come in. So it would be just to focus on, just to make note of that, or it's just making note of where the thought, or where the thought comes from. Because I was thinking you were talking more like mood, but it's more of a state.
Mood is part of a mind states also, but yeah, the awareness of mind states, to name them and then to observe them in the body is the easiest, because mind states are always having some kind of contraction or opening or feelings in your body, and observing the physical sensation is a way to keep the attention really grounded so that you don't get into the story again of the mood, because whatever mood is there is creating the story. So body, again, coming back into the body, the emotional body when we're practicing that awareness. So anytime awareness of an emotion comes, naming sadness, happiness, and then seeing where is that in the body. When it changes, then you go back to your primary object to give the mind a home base.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Marilyn?
Thanks, Ren. Yeah, you answered the follow-up question I was going to ask in that the blank where is usually emotions in my experience. So I was going to ask you that.
Okay.
And I also wanted to share something that happened this morning that seems applicable. My husband and I had a wonderful conversation about some differences of opinion we had yesterday, or just his complaining about a very old issue that I move his stuff. If he could have put one more line in our wedding vows, it would have been, and never move my stuff. But I have a compulsion to make everything tidy, and so there it is. So last night, within the space of half an hour, he discovered not one, not two, but not three, but four things I had moved of his, and now they were missing, and where were they? And a couple of cases I was able to find them. In one case, I don't know. I probably moved it, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, so he was kind of upset last night, but we went ahead and had a fairly pleasant rest of the evening. And this morning we were snuggling in bed, and he said, "Boy, you were really in rare form last night with moving all those things of mine." And I said, "Yeah, I know. Sometimes I get dingy." And he said, "But you know, it makes me love you not one less, well, not an iota less. It just, it's beside the point," was what he was saying. And I can't tell you what a long road we have walked to get to that conversation. In the past, and not too many years ago, Izumi knows, we would have erupted into a big fight the evening before. But I've learned to just admit when I've caused him pain, even though I think it may not be the most reasonable pain, but I admitted it, and that's how he got past it so easily. So that the next morning, and I realized that I feel the same way about him, that no matter how irritated I get with him from time to time, it never shakes the love. It never shakes the commitment. So this is a non-Buddhist, non-meditator, by the way. Don't make no difference in my experience. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk. And you said something at the end that went by quickly, but even though I know it, sometimes things when you hear them, you said things heal when they're seen. And I'm a therapist. I mean, I know this, but somehow this morning, not only when they're seen by ourselves, but when we have a witness, I think it's just such a basic truth that we all need witnesses to our pain, and that can diffuse a lot.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I really enjoy your humor, very gentle humor. It's great. And I found it personally really helpful to look beyond the thinking rather than just labeling the thinking or the feelings or the sensations.
You found it helpful when you were
practicing? I found
practicing?
it very helpful to actually say, well, wait a minute, where do they come from? What's behind that? As you instructed earlier, I'm like, oh, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on there that I wasn't paying attention to.
Were you able to see what it was?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, great.
Not everything, but quite a bit of it, yeah.
Okay,
so it was very helpful. Thank you.
Good.
I was at Norman yesterday, and he was talking about the importance in these times of getting serious about being a bodhisattva. And what you said about, hearing other people's point of view, like I just shut right down, and the moment I know that somebody supports him, I just, I'm just gone. I can't let it in. I have complete compassion fatigue, and I've been practicing a while, but if you're saying enlightenment takes that away, I mean, I must be so many lifetimes in that right now, I keep trying to look for a skill, that will be like, I don't just go, no. I don't want to know that person. I don't want to know what they think anymore, and it's not really, I don't love it.
Yeah.
But I find myself doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that I've witnessed a lot of that in friends, and because of this practice and my commitment to it, the accountability for what are we then creating and just seeing, because we can keep discernment, because discernment doesn't create pain. But when that goes into, the mind starts to construct things in a way, stories in a way, where we're believing our stories much more than we are actually hearing the actual experience there. But even if you're observing something that's clear harm, there is a way to be with that, and that's the practice, and it's not easy. Nobody would ever say that it's easy. It takes effort, and it takes a kind of, a very clear intention. That's what I want to do. I want to overcome my own hatred. I don't want it because it burns me. It hurts me. I've seen that very, very clearly. It proclaims itself righteously in my mind. It's the creator of wars and why we're still at war in so many places in the world. So it's not easy. Politicians don't know how to do it, and people don't know how to do it. But there are practices that we can help. The hard thing is when we're right. The harder thing is always right? When we're right and we know we're right, then the mind clings to that. The way to uncling that is to really understand the truth that I shared that quote in here a couple of weeks ago. Unlimited are unruly beings in the world. Unlimited. They're everywhere. There's nothing you can do to change that. So really seeing and understanding that and then acting from a place that doesn't then create more pain for you, where you can change. So if your feelings of separation and righteousness and anger were making positive change, I would say keep going with those. But they don't tend to. And so, but there are other places where we can. So we can acknowledge, you come up against somebody, they have different views from you, and you can see these views, maybe let's call it a racist view or something. You see somebody, they're holding on to that. A racist view, right? We can know that as unwise. We can know that as their own ignorance. We can know that. How do we know that? We know how our own ignorance, how we cling to our own views. That's how we get to know that, how we are conditioned by things. I had all these conditioning. I'm going to read this actually, because I didn't when I was, but this is pointing right to this. I loved this when I read it. One whose doctrines aren't clean, fabricated, formed, given preference to. One whose doctrines aren't clean. So they're fabricated, formed, and given preference to when he sees it to his own advantage. Relies on a peace dependent on what can be shaken. When we cling to our ideas, we're relying on a peace. Your peace has been shaken, right? Dependent upon what it can be shaken. Because entrenchments and views aren't easily overcome. When considering what's grasped among doctrines, that's why a person embraces or rejects a doctrine in light of these very entrenchments. The entrenchments of views that we carry are not easily overcome. My Russian ideas of Soviet Union. I was like, wow, those entrenchments are still there. I could see through them easily once I saw them, once reality was there, with this practice of mindfulness. I don't cling to them anymore. I'm not clinging to them. So my mind can be more open and see a kind of reality. But that's true of our friends that disagree with us. The entrenchment and views are hard to overcome. But again, like what I said, when you're clinging to a view that people shouldn't support whoever you're talking about, I have no idea, then you're clinging to a view. And there's something you can do something about, Everybody else clinging to their views, you can't. You can try, though. If you want to keep trying that, go ahead.
Hi. I love the clinging. I love talking about that. I don't know if this might help, but a few years ago when whoever was elected that we don't want to talk about, I was friends with someone who I felt was a really formidable human being and was a loving, kind person. And I didn't realize what his political views were. And he said something about our former president. And I just said to him, why do you hate him so much? Right? I allowed him to vocalize what his experience was, unlike my experience. It wasn't my experience. And from that, I mean, I have viewpoints about things, and I love about being loving and kind, and this person was. And so the fact that he supported someone who I didn't see that way was really confusing. But I could look past and hear the pain that he felt was his experience while we had our previous president. And I think I've been really trying to do that in all areas. Some of what you're saying, like not cling to what my thinking is, because I have experiences that are separate from other people's experiences. And I want to really listen to those experiences and let them in a loving kind of way, even though it's not easy. I'm not saying it's, but I find when I'm more open that we have a much more opportunity to share our experiences rather than when I'm like, well, you're wrong and I'm right. And, you're a horrible person. It really doesn't move anything forward. And I know we've heard that thing, agree to disagree. I don't know if that's really the case. It's just to be kind about what other people's thoughts are, because we don't know their previous experiences. We only really know ours. Yeah. And the more, I was sharing with my friend that I'm a teacher, and one of my students, I was saying some things in class, and I'm so proud that my student felt brave enough to question me and to come to me. And it was so enlightening. Now, I didn't agree with how she perceived it because it wasn't my perception, but I could hear her perception. It wasn't what my intention was, but I could just listen to how it felt to her. And I just said to her, thank you so much. That was really brave of you to come and to tell me your experience. And then that opens my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the pain and suffering behind politicians is just not worth it. For supporting people, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. And societally, we've seemed to have grown away from understanding that you don't have to agree. And, everybody's willing to cut each other out and become more, I think more. Does it seem like more to you guys, more than before? People could tolerate each other even if they didn't. Yeah, it seems just more extreme now. Yes. Yeah. So you don't have to. We don't have to. I have great friends that disagree with me politically. It's totally, and then it goes there and I get triggered, and so I'm triggered. All right, and then we move on. It's fine. But we believe that the person that we don't agree with is ruining our whole world and the environment and all of those things, and we get scared, and the fear. But again, it practices being responsible for that, taking full responsibility for our fear, our creation of monsters, our creation of, And then, of course, we have it being fed by, now news stations are very different than they used to be. They're just teaching us agendas. Watch them all. Watch them all. Fox News will tell you about the immigrant that killed somebody. And CNN will tell you about the black person killed by a cop. You won't see that on Fox, you know. You won't see the immigrant on CNN equally. Which one is true? Both things are happening. Like, I'm going to line up my viewpoints more, give all the proof to my viewpoints. That's societally what we're doing, what the mind does. Anytime we are entrenched in a view, we look for the proof of that, and it lines up. So anytime we're entrenched in a view, we're not holding the totality of any situation. Yeah.
Yes. I'm going back to where, when it's politics or politician, you can separate yourself and say, okay, you know, the pendulum swung this way, the pendulum will swing another way. And that's what history shows us.
Yeah.
And so we hope that in the middle, somehow we'll muddle through. But when it's a child, when you see your child, in this case, an adult son, doing something that really I disagree with very profoundly because of what it's doing to him and how he feels about himself. And he then he's a vegan, and I'm sort of a lukewarm, you know, anywhere between a little bit carnivore and a little bit vegetarian, but it's, you know, it's just a different way of looking at it. And he'll tell me how I'm destroying myself and whatever. And so it's very hard with somebody that you're so worried about his health and his well-being. He's worried about mine. And so it's challenging. And I'm not sure how to get around it. The last time he was complaining about his extreme weight, I said, you know, Matan, I really don't know what the right thing is to do, but it appears to me from what you say that something's not working for you. That's all. I don't know what to do, what to suggest. I'm not going to suggest anything because I don't know. And I'm feeling this sadness because I am worried about his health as he is about mine.
Yeah.
You know, when I broke my leg, my knee, his comment was, well, you should stop eating dairy. I mean, you know, like, okay, well, that's a little, right now, not very compassionate and not very much to the point. But okay, he was worried and expressing it in the way that he knows how.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I think about it, like now.
Yeah.
Right now, I realize he's expressing his loving kindness or his compassion in his way.
Yeah.
I didn't accept it that way. Yeah, real compassion about dairy.
Yeah.
But I don't know what technique you talk about, the work that you have to do to get to the point where you don't sit in judgment. I experience the worry, and I want to have a relationship with him.
Yeah.
And and I'm worried about him. And I don't know how to work with that very well.
Yeah. So in terms of what we were learning and practicing today, it's amazing how much that is applicable in these situations, how simple it is and how applicable it is. Because when we see that worry has then arisen with the tool of mindfulness, then you go right inside that feeling of worry and investigate it. Like worry. Is worry helpful? Is it helpful? No. Okay.
I have a lot of experience with it, and I know this now.
Okay. Well, good, because I remember there was one point, early on in my practice, that I told my teacher, I'm just worried about something. And she said, worry is a very unwholesome mind state. And I was like, oh, great. God. I thought I was helping. Thought I was supposed to. Thought I had to or something. Subconsciously, if we're worrying still, we still somewhere in us believe we have to, that it's helping. So on the intellectual level, we can know it, but on the subconscious level, we have to address it so that when it arises in us, we know it to not be helpful, to see it, to turn the mind in on itself, to feel it in the body before acting, speaking, wait for it to pass. And there is an alternate practice of loving kindness, which is very, very different than worry. So you don't want to practice to the point that you don't feel those feelings anymore. Well, you do, but it might not happen, and that's fine. It hasn't happened for me. But what we do have is, again, that willingness or a tool that when it arises, like, okay, I'm not going to feed this. It happened right here as we were watching the mind, and I started to think thoughts. My thoughts were thinking about what I should say to you guys. And then I noticed, oh, it's coming from worry. Like, oh, I want them to be okay. And I'm worried. That's not wholesome. Well, let's let that pass. And I have a son, so I know worry well. I know it very well. It arises constantly. It's dictating my actions constantly. So have the heart, that patience with yourself, but a little bit of a commitment that those worry words aren't going to be acted on anymore on the level of thinking, acting, or speaking, because they're not going to help you and your son's relationship. And his views of you, you can't do anything about. So if it's dairy, like, okay, all right.
I hear you and other teachers say, well, when the feeling arises, investigate it.
Yeah.
What does that really mean?
It means be aware of it directly. So when feelings arise and we're not aware, we're in the story of it. Those feelings have us. Worry arises and it's coming with a sense of urgency and truth that you need to act on it. You need to do something. Mm-hmm. And there's a story behind that coming from. Mm-hmm. So mindfulness is the exact opposite of you go, okay, acknowledge worry. That's the first step. It's here. This is what it is. Sometimes we're acting, thinking, speaking on worry. We don't know we are even, So the first is just knowing this is worry here. You already know it's not a helpful or useful thing. Mm-hmm. So then with this tool of mindfulness, then you can come out of the story that's perpetuating the feeling, the fabrication that's created in the mind, come into the feeling in the body, and then learn to sit with that feeling. So, and if you do that once, you have reconditioned your nervous system. And if you repeat that, that will get stronger and stronger and stronger so that it no longer overwhelms you, or causes trouble in your relationship.
You know that you're having the feeling.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
That's really not a big deal for me to know. It's and I heard you, but I think I tuned out because it's just like, I can't quite get my arms around. What do you do about that? So you're aware that you're worrying or afraid. I've lived with that a long time. And then what?
Sustained mindfulness. Sustained mindfulness.
Feel it in the body.
Yeah. That's what I just said. Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Try it. Have an intention to try it.
Oh.
Have an intention to try it. If you don't have an intention to, you won't. You'll come, you'll sit here 30 minutes, you'll go home, and everything will be the same. But if we have an intention to bring mindfulness practice, okay, when my son, he's going to do it again, right? He's going to do it. This is the condition. We all do the same things again and again. Mm-hmm. And I start to feel that feeling. I'm going to try to sit with it instead of acting on it. I'm going to try to sit with it instead of acting on it. Let it pass. Accept it, and it will pass. And then find a different place. I care about you. I love you. I accept you also as you are, whatever. Loving kindness is a great antidote for worry. May you be safe, healthy, happy, and peaceful. And we're not responsible for it. May you be safe, healthy, happy, and peaceful. And you're an adult and you're going to do what you're going to do. So there's no clinging.
That's wonderful. Thank
Oh, good. Yes,
yeah.
Hi.
I want to share something that I noticed during the meditation that kind of relates to that. Was when you were saying to be aware of the state of consciousness that different thoughts are coming from. I noticed that most of any thoughts that were worrisome thoughts came from a deeper place of love and compassion for people, for the people that I was thinking about. And then once I realized that, it was just like, oh, then I could sit in that feeling that was deeper than the worry of the compassion and love and where the worry was coming from, right? So, I don't know. Just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, I was thinking about what you were saying earlier, and I guess the way I choose to view this moment in history is that he who shall not be named is a sort of funhouse mirror reflection of some of the uglier parts of all of us, like the blood, the pus. Like you said in this meditation, it's that instinct we have in traffic where someone cuts us off and we curse at that person that we don't know who they are. Yeah, I guess I just choose to view it that way, and then it sort of makes it a little lighter and easier to find compassion for other people, though their viewpoints may be different in the way they express it in a voting booth. They're still people, under the influence of some of the same instincts that we all have. And so it's an opportunity to reflect on ourselves. And hopefully, like you said, this is all cyclical and we will evolve. And so I think it's a moment to see that ugliness, see it in ourselves, and then, consciously change it within ourselves first, obviously.
There was a time years ago when George Bush was the president and the Dalai Lama was being interviewed. And, we all hated George Bush at that time. The start of the Iraq War was devastating, still devastation from it. So there was this righteousness in the left, or mostly, Buddhists are mostly of hating George Bush. Dalai Lama was asked who he thought one of the most interesting people in the world was, and he said, George Bush. And everybody was so surprised that he said that. And he said, I don't agree with his views, but he's a human being and I love him. And it was such a power. He did that. I don't even think he thought George Bush was the most interesting person, but that was a teaching moment for him. So we have to be very diligent about righteous anger if we want peace in this world. And Trump is here to show you that, if for nothing else. If you think it's okay to hate him, then we've got work to do. It arises, we've got work to do. Am I triggering anybody? Okay, let's close and share the merit of our practice. Okay, so just reflecting on, it is hard to overcome our views and to overcome our own inner greed, hatred, delusion. It's so, so, so hard. So the fact that any of you were willing to stay here with all of those human feelings is a great beauty and so needed in the world. So acknowledging that goodness and what they call the merit accumulated from that goodness. And then we can share that merit. Think of a human in your life or being in your life. They could be dead or alive. You'd like to dedicate your practice to. May the goodness that has arisen from my practice benefit you. May the goodness that has arisen from my practice benefit all beings everywhere. Thank you, everybody. It's so nice sitting with you all. Yeah.